Never seen a smile so big on my little old lady's face until I tell her I'm going fishing all weekend. Pack up all of my bait and I make plans for 7:45 and I swing around, pick up my date for the weekend. Some reason she seems to please when I'm leaving. There's something I'm missing when I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing.
Yeah, baby.
Yes, sir. Steve Shaw's in the house. Lloyd Bront's here. What's up, Jeremy? How you doing? Ryan Thompson's with us. Good evening, everyone. Right back at you, Ryan. How's the salmon running everywhere? Good question. We're going to be talking to Jay about that and various other things with our panel who have, again, generously joined us this evening. How's it going, Pete? Nice to see you had a great weekend. Hope everybody had a great weekend. I tell you, it was... They call it the last weekend of summer, but some will say Labor Day's that. It officially doesn't come to an end till I think like the 21st. But either way, when you look at the weather, and weather's going to be the topic of today's conversation. When you look at the weather, we can assume every morning we wake up, it's going to get to 20 degrees plus. Going forward, not every day is going to be 20 from what it appears to be anyway. It looks like we will be struggling the next couple of days to get to 20. Some cold nights, which we're going to find out from the panel. Is that going to turn the fish on? Because for some of us who were experiencing, the lethargic days of summer type fishing, some of you have been slamming them, some of you have been hitting them hard, but others, depending on the weather, lack of wind, hot temperatures, high sun, you may not have been hitting them as hard. These cold nights, is that going to turn them on? We're going to find out from the panel. Panel's going to discuss it. Sally's in the house. How you doing, Barry? And now that you're with us, I want to bring to light something that was really, really cool that unfortunately I didn't see firsthand, but I caught wind of after. But this is really, really cool. So this is our beloved Steve Shaw. And the person in the middle with the birthday balloons, I don't want to say around her neck, but she's holding the birthday balloons. Her name is Wilma Cairns. And of course, Backroad Adventures, Barry and Sally presented her with some stickers, but they made the trek all the way down to Timmins. This gem of a lady comes down every year on her birthday. And I want to congratulate her, celebrate, and wish her the happiest of birthdays. She's 83 years old. Her name, as I said, is Wilma Cairns. She turned 83, but don't let that fool you. This little sweetheart is a dedicated and determined little angler, a passionate angler for over 53 years, and still going strong. This is the type of tenacity that inspires us all. Wilma, you make us all CFN family proud. Written very well by our good buddy Walt. Big shout out, as I said, to Sally and Barry for making the trek way down to Port Hope to be a part of this beautiful little meet and greet. And for, as I said, providing her with some really cool things to go away with. And she is, I want to welcome her to the CFN family. She is the newest of CFN members right there. Her name is Wilma Cairns. She does this every year on her birthday. And a big shout out to you, because this makes us, as Barry and Sally, Walt, Steve, and all of us here at CFN would agree, very CFN proud. Love getting together with our fellow CFNers, and I would be at a loss if I didn't mention that our OFC CFN retreat is coming up very, very soon, September 23rd to the 25th. If you've been thinking about it, if you're on the fence, let me say there are only 3 spots left. That's 3. I don't know if you can see 3 spots left. So if you're interested, you want to attend, it's $380 for the weekend. That includes 3 days, 2 nights, all of your food, which is all your meals, the cabin, your lodging, a boat, motor, gas, and worms. That's an incredible deal. And if you want to go up like I do and spend an extra couple nights, make sure you reach out to Camp McIntosh. Each night extra is $190, $190. You can't beat that. Can't get a hotel room for that. So again, 3 spots still available. We'd love to see you there. And if you want to show your CFN proud, reach out to Fish Whipped Apparel and grab one of our CFN all new merchandise packs that includes, of course, the boat flag, a nice chapeau, a hat, and of course the buff. And the one on the left is my favorite, where the CFN logo lines up on your face. It's right there. And anyway, it just stands out so beautifully. So big shout out to Babs for getting this done. And of course, that is it for me for formal, announcements, but informal announcements coming this week. You will see lots of thank yous in regards to the CFN Fish Off and, of course, all our generous sponsors. With the unbelievable help of POW Castings, we managed to get all the rods out. So they're all out this weekend. They literally left this morning. And all the prize packs for the bronze, silver, and gold winners have been issued. And last but not least, of course, the provincial winners. So we'll make sure that we announce all of them as we move forward. But if there's any other announcements, I just want to go to the comments and just make sure that I didn't miss any. But really cool. Oh, nice to see you, Mitchell. Corey's in the house. Ed McKenzie. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, baby. Daryl's here. How you doing, Daryl? Camp McIntosh. Yes, of course, that is the link. Thanks, Steve, for sharing that. If, in fact, you are, again, just thinking about it on the sidelines, not really sure, 3 spots available. There's the website. Get a hold of Tracy or Andre, and they'll set you up. Mike Howard's in the house. Nice to see you. Jeanette, love the boat flag. Yeah, baby. Yes. And Barry and Sally are going, as well as the Steve Shaw family. And there's a whole bunch of us. Heather, Greg Kuntz, Max is going to be there. Moose, Jeff Richard, Mike Consul. So, yes, there's going to be quite a group. We're really, really looking forward to getting up there, spending some time together. And we'd love to see you there with us. So, as I said, reach out. On that note, I'm done with announcements. I don't have much more to say other than I can't wait to spend some time with our panel. So without further ado, let's get right to our wonderful sponsor, Shimano, and of course, the best opening on Facebook Live. Jim McLaughlin is up next. Big Jim McLaughlin, the one and only. How you doing, Big Jim?
I'm alive.
Attaboy. Well, you know what? I must say, it was great seeing you out in the water. That was a great shot with you and Luke Northmore. Fantastic to see you out. Buddy, the smile said it all.
It was really cool to get in the boat like that and go do my thing. Been far too long, and it was really funny, because Luke doesn't have a lot of experience in boats. So he just loved the Lund because he had all his camera stuff with him and everything, and he had so much room for it all, and it's down in, and that kind of thing. So it was perfect for him, eh? But we YouTube being heckled. We started doing some stuff on YouTube, and I know where all you guys live. I know all your email addresses and stuff. So you all better get on there and subscribe to my channel and
there you go,
share and all that stuff.
There you are.
Or I'm going to get the list and start working down it. You'll be reading it. You'll be on Global News. There'll be a few every week. Then they'll have Grissom down working on it, and everybody else. But go on and subscribe. It'd really be good. But we had a great day. First couple hours in the morning, I went to, because I haven't been out there this year, and I went to a couple of areas that are usually tried and true that I catch fish from, and there's no weed. Like, I'm standing there looking in the water, scratching my head, and I'm looking around, and I fished around, and then the wind started to blow from every direction, which, when I'm not really on top of my game in practice, it sort of gets in the way a little bit of what I want to do. And then probably about 1 o'clock, it just started to cloud over a little bit, and it got a little bit miserable. We got a little bit of mist once in a while. The wind sort of died down about half what it was. Like, I mean, there was like waves, like the water was lapping, like it was rolling, eh? And it blows right down that lake. You've been there, Scottie. It's straight down it, just straight down it, eh? And anyways, I went to a few spots to get out of the wind that are usually places I fish anyway, because I've always got places to go that are in, regardless of which way the wind blows, you got to find a place where you can go that has fish. And that was something we learned from tournament fishing, being prepared. And anyways, cut a long story short, I went through a few places, got a few little dicks, pound and a half, that type stuff. And eventually I said to him, I sat down and I looked at him and I said, I'm gonna look at the charts here, and I'm gonna go somewhere I've never been. So I look at the chart and I just look at it and see to myself, wow, look at that. And it's this great big area where on a hydrographic chart, the way it shows, the blue is the shallow water and the white's the deeper. So I look and there's this big flat, it's probably 600 yards long, 600 yards. So it's a fair size. And the deep water runs right up close to the shore. Now, I don't mean it's 10 or 12 feet at the shore. It's sort of come up like this right at the shore. Okay. So the deeper water runs right in closer to the shore, which is a big factor with fishing a lot of times. And I picked the flat. I went about halfway up it. And the second cast I took, I got like a 3-pounder. Then we got a few more, and we started drifting. And as it clouded over, we did a couple more drifts. So we got a few, but they were 2 pounds, 2.5. I mean, it's not bad fishing when you're catching 2.5 pound bass. It's all, it's all good. And I said to him, I got to go try a couple of other spots. So I said, I got to go to a dock that I know. I've got this dock. There's always some mat behind it. It's tucked away. Nobody ever fishes it. I would say I've gone there in my life 20 times, and maybe 16, 17 times I've caught a big fish. So we go around the back of it, and I look in. There's no mat. There's just a little bit of weed. It's just like horrid. So I fish along the side of it and get nothing. I said, well, there's nothing we can do. It ain't going to happen here. So I says to him, we'll go back down and fish the weeds some more, see what happens. We got lots of time. It's only like 2 o'clock now, maybe. So I go around the other side of the dock, and I'm looking at the dock, and I stop and I pick up my rod and I throw the craw right up at the very back of the dock. There's a ramp comes down to the dock. It's got a big houseboat on it, and the wind is blowing right through, so it carries the jig. The jig got up in the air a little bit, and the wind caught it and brought it out a few feet. So I reeled it right back in, and I threw it right back, right along the edge of the dock. It was like this far from the dock it landed. And I look down, and I look at him, and I go, oh, I like this. And I can see the line coming out. So there's a fish under the dock, picked it up while it was going to the bottom, and he's headed out away from. So I assume there's another fish there because he picked it up and ran with it. And I set the hook. It was like a 4-pounder. And we got that in the boat, and we went back to that flat, and it had really socked in. Now it had got cloudy, it had calmed down a little bit, and I caught about 35 largemouths.
Oh, hence the reason, Steve, there was such a smell. Yes,
and a lot of 3.5s, close to 4, and every single one of them came on that.
Wow.
The
Incredible.
TN70?
Yeah. Oh, that's the 70.
Yeah, just a little bit bigger, yeah. Yeah, just a little bit bigger. And as you can see, I'm a good boy. What's it attached to?
There you are.
I'm not telling any names here now, but I saw somebody last week fishing with a wacky rig with a big brass swivel on it that was too big to use for lake trout if you wanted to use a brass swivel. So I'm thoroughly disappointed. And for now, I'm holding the picture and the name just so they know. But it was amazing. And of course, I had a titanium on it, had 20-pound test Yozuri hybrid.
Yeah.
A cross between monofilament and what is it they call it? Fluorocarbon.
Fluorocarbon, yeah.
Yeah, it's a. I don't know if I got this. I don't have the spool here. I tidied everything up here. We had some house showings on the weekend.
Nice.
But the cool thing about this is, though, that little clip at the beginning where Keith's got the big, got the fish on in the boat. This is that rod. That's the 7-foot Zodius glass.
Yeah,
I don't know how much of this you can see. I'll try to get back here.
But it looks like it's got some serious backbone, Jim.
Yeah, it does. But the important thing is, if I get back far enough, see when you pull it, see the way the whole rod bends?
Yeah.
See the way the whole rod bends basically from end to end? That's the key when using baits like this. Guys won't use these because they say fish just jump, they shake it and they get off. But if they're attached to a bungee cord, then this can't get free. It
100%.
Can't get loose. We've talked about this so many times, Scottie, about how fish get off at the side of the boat. People keep the rod bent the whole way to the boat, and then they're trying to net it, and it's bent. The fish comes up. What do? They drop the rod tip. The rod goes straight. The line slack. Just like that's why everybody loses, lake trout at the side of the boat when they're trolling.
Yeah.
Very seldom do they come off when you're reeling them in because they're gaffed. As soon as they get in, and the line goes slack, they shake once and they're gone. You
Great
see
point.
that all the time out there.
Quick question. Jeremy has that rod, and I would have to. I understand why you're asking, Jeremy. When it comes to salmon or steelhead, would a rod like that be a good choice?
Hey, that's a really good question. I'm thinking, the casting they do off the piers. I don't do that, but I got some buddies that do it like big time, like Tackle Box Tony. He's down there every morning chucking spoons and that, and I would imagine that would be pretty good because once it loads, it's just like a downrigger rod almost. You could use it on a downrigger rod in a pinch. I mean, you can get by with anything in a pinch, but this would I would assume this would make a great replacement because of the flex in it. And, that G in there is for glass because it's actually a composite. And that's the whole deal, eh? When you watch Keith Combs there, when he backs up in that boat and pulls that rod, and you see that bow, that's the exact same rod. And it just, they don't come any better. You can use them for spinner baits, rattle baits, crankbait. Well, crankbaits is what they were designed for. But anything with treble hooks that you're going to move horizontal, like from side to side, because you don't always get them in the mouth. But, we had fish yesterday. I'm bringing them in and I'm watching them. And I'm thinking, they must be snagged underneath here. They must have somehow got it underneath. But it wasn't. It was just line coming out their mouth.
Wow.
They're like 2-pounders. And they just munched that right in there. Yeah, I know you can't see it here, but it was virtually brand new. This is what I had put on to have at the sportsman shows.
Yeah.
But it's just chewed and munched and all scarred up and everything.
Wow.
So,
now, Steve has asked the question that I was going to get to next. Steady retrieve on those TN70s, or were you letting it?
Pretty well. I was burning it with odd little twitch here and there.
And they'll run pretty much as deep as you let them, right?
Well, yeah, it sinks. So, as deep as you want to let it go. You fish it a little bit slower or just let it sink first. But it's absolutely amazing. Some of these fish, there's one, we got so much footage to put in the next YouTube thing. It's going to be crazy. I'm going to do an explanation of all the rods and reels and everything here in the office, and we'll add it to it. Mm-hmm. But there was one fish there that I said, I couldn't believe it. When you cast those with that flex in that rod, even with 15-pound test line there, you can chuck it a long way.
I can imagine.
Flies. And there was one cast that I made, and I turned the handle about 5 times, and he hit it, and I almost pulled the rod out of my hands.
Jeez.
That's probably 60 feet away from me. And with the flex in the rod, the way you felt it. If that would have been a flipping rod, it probably would have pulled the rod out of my hands. You're just not expecting it.
Wow.
Like I said to Luke, I said, I can't believe how hard that fish hit that. I said, he took a beat on that in Smith Falls, put it in overdrive in Portland, and then just got going faster before he got here. Like, I could not believe the impact from so far away.
Oh, wow.
And yet then I had another one to show you how hot they were. I had another one, and I'm bringing it in, and I look down, and I'm just about to say to him, wow, we just drifted over a big clump. I can't imagine that there wasn't fish in it. And then I'm bringing in the lure, and I just drift off the end of the clump, and I'm watching the rattle weight come in, and all I see is a white mouth come straight up out of the weeds, the white, and just eats it this far under the surface, right at the side of the boat, a 3-pounder. Came straight up. He timed it. He came out of the weed, out of the end of the weed, and took it. You'll see my reaction. Like I'm very aware when I fish of what's going on. That's half the deal with fishing. And when you see these things happen, like I've never seen that happen with bass before.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them eat lures from 15 feet away, but not come straight up out of a weed bed with 6 feet of line off the rod. Like, it was absolutely amazing. What's really cool about that bit with the mouths like that is when you drop and reel for lake trout, and you bring up a bait and you're watching the electronics and you see him coming, and you look down and he's still 20 feet down.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you see the big white mouth open up. I had that happen one time fishing in the Big Rito with Tammy. She was sitting in the back of the boat there, taking in some rays and that, a beautiful sunny day. And of course you could see down 25, 28 feet there pretty easy. And I just screaming to her, come here. I can see the mouth coming for like 10 feet. It's already got its mouth open. It's coming. And I just slowed the jig right down, and he just like, and you just saw it turn, and it's like a 20-pounder.
So I've never experienced it. I know Tyler Brooks and Mark Elbeck have talked about it at great length, how cool it is to watch a lake trout come screaming up from the depths chasing a bait. So I'm looking forward to that. Jim, one thing, though, it is a bit of a theme for tonight, is it's interesting how you mentioned this flat really wasn't necessarily producing at first.
No, this was a new spot. I got fish off it from the get-go.
But you noticed you had mentioned before we went live that there was an area that you were fishing that when it became overcast and the wind picked up, all of a sudden it was like
that's where I got them all.
So
I looked at the GPS track, and there's like 8 or 10 lines, and they're just all like this, and they're like about 50 feet apart, one over to this side, one over to this side down. There's a couple that are like all the way across and back and forth. I just, meandered back and forth across them.
Yeah.
Just to be sure you're hitting different fish, but I mean, that's the kind of thing, if I would have found that at 8 o'clock in the morning, by 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock at night when we stopped, it would have just been solid line. There wouldn't have been any lines. The cursor.
But as I said, the cool thing is how the weather all of a sudden turned the fish on. And this is what we're talking about today, how, show of hands for those who are watching, have you had days where the weather directly affected the production? And did you see it turn on once, say, the wind picked up, it went overcast, there was maybe some light rain, this, that, and everything else? Did you have a positive effect to the weather or a negative where they turned off? I know Jim just mentioned one that it worked and helped out. Of course, a lot of folks are asking about the hair, and Jeremy's asking no fluff.
No, I'm not doing this. There's no clarity. There's no seeing the fish. They're just, fluff is a target thing.
Yeah.
This, what I was doing is you got an area, there's fish in it, they're spread around on it, and there's lots of them. And you're just sort of combing the water, looking for the aggressive fish. But yesterday got ridiculous at one point.
Wow.
And Luke caught a pile too.
Wow.
He was down sitting at the back, but Yeah, I saw somebody mention about pike there. Yeah, we got a couple of pike. I got one I took a picture of. When I got it out of the water, I looked at it and I thought to myself, are you ever skinny? Had this great big head and big shoulders and everything. When you got it out, it looked like it hadn't eaten for 2 weeks. Like it was just absolutely amazing. But it fought like a champ. Oh man, it was just incredible. And we did a lot of underwater stuff with it, which will be in the video. We got the GoPro in the water, and we got pictures of it. It's got the TN across its nose, and all the cabbage hanging on it. That's something else this spot had. It had a lot of milfoil.
Yeah.
But it also had a little bit of cabbage scattered here and there. And a number of times where I would bring in the bait and have weed on it, it was milfoil. And then we would bring in the bait with a fish on it, with cabbage on it.
Interesting. Well, I know it was either you or Jay that was talking about, healthy vegetation is key to holding fish, not just necessarily attracting them, but holding fish. If you get a nice clump of milfoil, nice clump of cabbage, yeah, absolutely. Coontail.
Yeah, and you can tell too, like all the weeds are starting to get this. A lot of them are starting to get this bright green on top of them, where they're all starting to grow again here because they had some clear days. A lot of the color has gone out of the water, the algae. There might have been some overhead cover, like in the backyard here, as I explained in the one YouTube video. I looked down there this afternoon when I came in quick. I dumped some bags of wood chips in the boathouse, and you could see the glow of the emerald on the weeds, where 10 days ago it was all dirty looking because all the crap's gone off the top now, and it's not open. It's open on top again.
Mm-hmm.
So the fish are in there, and anywhere there's fresh weed, you reel a chatterbait or a crankbait through it. I caught so much. And I've seen something really weird out the back. And you're fishing for the same fish. If you're in a boat and you're moving, and you fish with a chatterbait for half an hour, and you don't catch anything, then you put on a crankbait and you start catching them. It proves nothing, because you're not fishing to the same fish. When you got to those fish, you could have kept using the chatterbait and caught them. But I'm staying in the same place. The lures are going over the same fish time and time again. And all of a sudden you switch to a crankbait and you catch 4, 5, 6 fish off that same patch that you've been fishing with a chatterbait for 15 minutes, or vice versa. It. And we got some really good overhead footage with the drone of the Macbeth coming back this far under the water, the shallows. And you can see that little wobble on it. It's really, really cool.
So I got to ask the same question that Steve has. When can we see some of these sneak peek previews?
There's one up there now. The one I did in the backyard's on. It's already live on YouTube. Tammy and Luke loaded it here last night.
Nice.
While I picked my nose. That's not my stuff.
Steve, we got
Luke said, I'm the eye candy. He's the tech guy.
Oh, that's hilarious. So yes, we have some hands up for folks who have had a drastic change in the fishing and their production based on a weather event. Whether, as I said, the wind all of a sudden picked up, you had some rain, sun disappeared. Jeremy says usually an hour before and an hour after a thunderstorm, I have caught some decent pike during both. I would say most of us would agree with that. Bill Landry, 100%, had a big storm hit and the walleye go into overdrive. I can't say enough about thunderstorms. I know it's unsafe to be out on them, especially if you're in a boat, but if you can manage to hit it as it's dissipating, it's going away, or just before it arrives, some of the best fishing. And I'm sure you would agree, Jim.
Yeah, well, fish know weather changes from it.
Yeah. Kevin Fox is asking, what substrate were you fishing? Gravel, obviously weed edge, yep. And how were you preventing weed buildup on the TN70?
Just fishing a flat and ripping it.
Ripping it.
Feel weed, you let the line go slack, give it a good jerk.
Perfect.
Most of the time it rips off. If it doesn't, you burn it back to the boat. It's it's not rocket science. It's those green patches. Anywhere that's green, of course, you can't go looking for them individually, especially on a cloudy day, because you can't really see them as well. On a sunny day, you can see them from 75 feet away. If you know what you're looking for, there's different hues on top of the water and stuff, and if you look, you can see them when you get there. Sure enough, it's green. That's why I always just look for the red milfoil. But yeah, no, this is what I did yesterday. Was just about. I found an area that the fish were holding in. There's a lot of fish in it, and they've been there probably since the middle of June.
Yeah.
And they will, in this lake here, because there's no real deep water, the deep edges of those is where they'll go to and live. You got to remember, as the fall comes, the fish that are shallow, and there's always some shallow, there's always some deep with largemouths and smallmouths too, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones that are shallow will start to move out. They'll start to live deeper, and so weeds disappear and stuff like that. Then when the conditions are right, they move back in. And then they start this back and forth. But every time they go back and forth, they don't come quite as far.
Mm.
And eventually it concentrates them in the deep water late in the fall, like, the end of November, December. Some of the best days I've had on largemouth lakes in 12, 15 feet of water have come right at the end of November, where you're just freezing. You're down to fishing just a jig pretty well, or some kind of a grub or something like that on a jig head. And usually a big jig, so usually like a half to 3/4 ounce, maybe even 1 ounce flipping jig, and just working it and working it and working it. It's it's just it's wondrous when it happens.
No, 100%. And when you get on them, there is no better feeling. So, as you said, I can imagine. The smile that you had in the picture, it explained everything.
Well, it was really good for me to get out too, because with the issues I've been having with the mobility.
Amen.
I went and I leaned on that pro pole at the front of the boat for 6 hours. I got into some massive pain sometimes. I'd just try to walk it off in the boat a little bit and just go back to it again. But it was great to go out and do it and succeed. And it was funny because Luke said to me, he said, he said, I could see you getting down a little bit, but he said it didn't make a difference. You just kept at the same level. You just kept doing it. And then all of a sudden you said, after 90 minutes, or what I'm doing is not working. So I'll just keep doing it for the rest of the day and then go home and say fishing something. So I picked something completely new, somewhere I hadn't gone. I could have gone to other flats and things, I know, but there's a time to look for stuff, and I felt like it was a time to look for stuff. I usually look for new stuff when the fish are biting. Like yesterday is the day that I should have ran around all over the lake, trying flats, places that I always looked at and wanted to fish. There was some across on the other side of the lake, across the channel, that I wanted to go and look at, but I thought to myself, you got a couple hours. Just hang on top of this here. There's a lot of fish here. And as it went on, they just kept getting bigger. They went from 1.5 pounds to 2 1/4 to 2 3/4. You started catching 3 pounders and then 3 1/2, 4. Like they just kept getting bigger. The fish just turned on. It was mayhem. And I'm sure if we would have stayed out a little bit later, we would have probably got some more really good ones.
So you were talking before we went to air in regards to the fact that up until now we have pretty much been guaranteed that every day is going to get to over 20 degrees Celsius. We are now starting to see some nights that are going to get off, a couple nights this week anyway, that are going to get chilly. Your prediction with those chilly nights, does that change and weather really start to turn the fish on?
Not right away. Well, the fish are turned on. Like, people say, I can't wait to fish in the fall when the fish fatten up. The fish started fattening up on the 1st of June as soon as they were done spawning.
Yeah.
They opened their mouths and they started eating. What do you think I ran into the other day here? You look, some of the fish, you'll see the guts on them. They make me look skinny. Like they're just like, there was one that I got and you looked at its stomach and it was about 3 pounds. I don't know whether we'll have pictures of it or not or whatever, how many we took. But it looked like it swallowed about 6 panfish and they were all sticking out crooked and sideways. Its belly was all bumpy. It couldn't get any fuller. They're just absolutely, like the mouth's open, like they got the toothpick ready, and they're just eating everything in sight that they can do. And it's only going to get more as it goes on. But those first few nights like that, they don't really have that much of an effect. They'll start to put those shallow fish off a little bit.
Right.
But I mean, people say, we're down to 7 degrees, the water's cold now. Well, the water's not cold. The top of the water's cold because the air was cold near it. You go down this far, look when you jump off a dock at a cottage and the water stinking hot. You go down 6 or 7 feet and all the kids are running around standing on the dock chattering because they were down in the cold water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing for the fish. When you get a fish and you hold him, you feel him and he's cold. That's because he's 8-10 feet down underneath the weeds. The sun's not affecting him,
yeah.
And he's cool, but he's happy. They're right in their mode right now. They're eating everything that they can.
Now, I'd be amiss if I did not mention or ask. We talked a lot about bass. Jeanette would like to know if she was a walleye, if you were a walleye or I was a walleye, where would I be this time of year in, say, a northern lake?
In a frying pan. You're probably pretty well in the same place that you were in a month ago.
Good to know. Good to know.
And you're going to be there for quite a while to come. There are small migrations toward current that start late in the fall that move up. You see, when the fish come into the Bay of Quinte in the fall, that's them coming to sort of stage to spawn.
Right.
That's why, like Captain Greg was talking about it getting better in December.
Yeah.
Because in 60 days they're going to be spawning, so they move back in. The Bay of Quinte is almost like a river to these fish. It's where they go into all the rivers up there to spawn. So they move back in the bay and they sit in the bay, and then they only have maybe a mile, a couple of kilometers to go up a river. Boom, spawn. A shoreline somewhere there that's wind driven, got gravel and rock on it. I mean, I've seen fish there spawning by the ferry years ago. Just when we used to fish offshore at night, just giants like. You're watching like 30, 32 inch walleye spawning. It's really, really cool. Right up on the edge of the ferry, right? Right on the boat launch at the ferry, you used to see them.
Unreal.
It was really, really cool. But yeah, and then in rivers, it's that movement. They move toward flow. They do get a lot deeper, but man, late in the fall, small natural lakes, shoals and things at night after dark, like 4, 6, 8 feet of water on gravel. They'll come up out of that deeper water. They do it from about the middle of the summer on right through the fall into November. You'll get them up in that real shallow water at night. I mean, people don't realize how shallow walleyes will go.
Oh, amen to that.
Especially the big ones.
Yes.
I mean, they don't call them gravel lizards. I've caught 10, 12 pound walleyes out of this much water and on crankbaits at night, and they just crush. They crush. They're in there for one reason, to kill something to eat.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. So we will be talking about that probably next week in regards to fishing at night. Our legacy member, Mark Beeler, was out hooking some toothy critters and managed to hook into a nice muskie. So we're going to be talking about that next week, the importance and the benefit of fishing at night and knowing your moon phases. But before we go, last but not least, now that you're back in the boat, how much for the legendary lawn chair Outback? Steve wants to know.
It's still there.
Still there. So it's not for sale.
A buddy of mine phoned me and told me that I should organize lawn chair tournaments where you have to be in a lawn chair.
Is that gentleman still with us?
You line up on the bank, you get your area, you draw for your area. So I thought that'd be kind of cool. He did anyway. No, you're frozen on me, Scotty.
I wouldn't want to be that good. See, there it is. Yeah, I saw that too. Jim, as always, thanks so much for joining us each and every Monday. Look forward to getting together this weekend, spending some time with you, of course, Luke, and who else is going to be with us?
Well, Sean's going to be here, but he's fishing shootout championship over here.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, so, but I'll talk to you. I just want to make sure the weather's going to be okay.
Yep.
We'll wait a couple of days. So
looking forward to it, buddy.
We'll get out and maybe I'll bring you to the secret flat.
Oof. Can't wait, my friend. Well, as always, dude, you
have to use the Tokyo rig, though.
Can't wait, dude. Can't wait. You be good, my friend.
Okay, guys, be safe. Catch a fish.
Thanks
Go subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Yes, Just Fishy. Absolutely. Please do.
I'm making notes. I'm getting a pad here right now.
There you go. Thanks, Jim. Take care.
You guys.
All the best. We're so lucky to have him every Monday. I tell you, just a wealth of information. You saw Luke with his post. I forget who it was here. Kevin Fox, I think, just a wealth of information. We are so lucky to have him every Monday, spending time with us, talking nothing but fishing, because there was a bunch of stuff there that I learned. I'm sure others have learned as well. Lawrence, coming up next. Here's a word from our sponsor before we start that conversation.
When it comes to Canadian food, we've got your back with flavors like lemon pepper, beer batter, campfire barbecue, lemon pepper dill, garlic butter and chives, and crispy Cajun. We've got a mix for every meal. Whether you're serving East Coast shrimp, West Coast salmon, succulent walleye, chicken wings, or veggies, we've got you covered. Coat your food in outdoor flavors. Available online or at these fine retailers.
Lawrence is in the house. How you doing, Lawrence? You're on mute. You got yourself on mute yet? Still on mute. Yeah. So the theme tonight is all about weather and how weather affects your fishing. And has it affected your fishing? And I know Lawrence.
How's that?
That's perfect.
All right, good, man. Good. Sorry about that.
No worries, dude. No worries. So the theme tonight is about weather.
Yes.
And I saw your post today in regards to how others are affected by weather, and have you seen a big change this year, other years? Has there been a trend for the last 3 years? Those who take detailed and accurate notes of all your days out on the water, is there something that is trending in your eyes when it comes to fishing? I know a lot of folks have seen how lethargic the fish will get, Lawrence, in the summer with those warmer temperatures. But now we're starting to get into what we would consider fall-like weather, where you're getting more rain, a little bit more wind, and of course the temperatures at night are starting to drop. So we talked to Jim. The immediate effect isn't going to be seen right away. I myself have been out on the water when the weather does change, becomes overcast, wind picks up, and boom, all of a sudden the fish start smacking. But needless to say, when it comes to the fall and seeing that transition with the weather patterns, there's a lot to be said about it, and it affects different fisheries differently.
And I've got some numbers here that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but just in terms of the heat, where it is, Canada, United States, around the world, what we're talking about, because, it's one thing to say, yeah, it's hot, it's so hot out, it's been hot here, but it's important, I think, to give it some context and what are we talking about in terms of heat? How much is it hotter? How is it compared to earlier years and around the world? And what does it mean? But I think before I do that, I just I know we're talking about our own personal fishing, and here in Ottawa, I fish in Quebec and north, south, a little bit, down the St. Lawrence and west and east, and lakes and rivers. And it was my experience this spring came late, and it was so late that we had higher waters, and they were a little bit cloudier. And as a result, it was cooler, cloudier waters and higher water levels that the wheat beds took forever to get established, right? And that's, that was this part of Canada. We had cooler, darker, murkier, deeper water. And by the time July rolled around, the fish had sort of acclimatized themselves to just not associate to wheat beds. They had all just moved into the deeper channels, and were just sort of becoming deep dwelling creatures. A lot of them had just become deep dwelling creatures. And that really affected the muskie fishing on the Ottawa River. It affected a lot of the fishing around here. But then look what happened in the summer. July, August, just constant heat every day around here. So things warmed up. The Ottawa River is still 74 degrees. It went up to 74 degrees by mid-June. Late June, it was 74 degrees. It just, what popped up there has not gone down. Never got to 80 this year. It might have a few times, but it's been 74, 75 degrees all summer long. And now here, mid-September, still 74 degrees. So that's affected the bite too. It hasn't really, the metabolism of the fish, what's that meant for the fish and how much they need to eat, and the oxygen in the water, it's an interesting time for sure, but it's been a constant heat summer in Ottawa, Eastern Canada. We've had a lot of just constant heat, and it's just not gone down. And it's still the same today. Like it's 27 degrees today, and it's 25 out there right now at this time, right? So Is it starting to come down? Are we starting to get those cool evenings? Yeah. Has it affected the water? No, not yet. It's going to, though. And once that water temperature starts to steadily click down, not just one big dump of cold rain like we're expecting now, that's going to drop it momentarily, or the surface water is going to get cool and then it's going to pop right back up again as soon as that flows out or mixes with the wave action and so forth. But that things will start to change. But it's just been a long, relatively dry summer, and water levels are now down. They're lower than normal. Everything's down a foot or two. All the rivers around here, all the lakes are down a foot or two.
Yeah, and it's interesting that a lot of the material that I read back in my 20s when it came to fishing and how weather affects certain fish and certain bodies of water and yada, yada, yada. One thing that I was always reading and was sort of steadfast in all of it was that river fish aren't as affected by, say, thunderstorms or weather events, much like lake fish. That, if a thunderstorm goes through, lake fish have a tendency to be more affected than river fish because they're constantly fighting current. And that may be true, but the one thing that I will say is these weather events, and you'll agree to this because you just mentioned it, I worry about our river fish after a rainfall because of everything that they're having to deal with now with all the runoff. As you said, the waters get murky. There's an influx of nutrients. Now they're dealing with algae blooms. And of course, not to mention all the garbage, but also it has an effect on the water temperature. And Bill has mentioned, 74 degrees. He's lucky to see his lakes get as hot as 68 or 69, not 74. So a little bit of a contrast depending on where you are, whether you're here in Ontario or out in Saskatchewan like Bill is. Definitely water temperatures have a variety of different highs and lows depending on where you are in the country. But in regards to that, going back to the river fishing, would you agree that, maybe it's always been historically known that river fish are less affected by weather events than, say, lake fish? But I would say now, with the amount of runoff that we're dealing with our urban centers, river fish are more affected by weather events than lake counterparts.
It's a severity, right? It's the severity of the weather event. And, thunderstorms roll in, roll out. You're like, what do you get? An inch of rain, half an inch of rain sometimes, maybe an inch and a half. It's not a giant deal. Hang on, I'll just unplug that. Hang on.
That's Jim calling.
To argue with me. Lord, shut up. Oh, God love him. But it's the severity of the weather events, right? And you look at some of the weather events that have been going on across Canada, across the United States, around the world, where you have a third of Pakistan underwater, where you got 3 feet of rain hitting South Korea, 3 feet. There's been 21 severe sort of weather events, cities that have experienced 1,000-year sort of heavy rains in the United States. Like once in 1,000 years, there's been a whole bunch of those happening in the United States this year. So on one hand, you have these heavy downpours in certain parts of the country, and we have that in Canada now. We see that, and in other parts of the country where you have a complete lack of rain. So you look at the 2 giant reservoirs, behind the Hoover Dam in the United States. There's 2 giant reservoirs there in Nevada and Utah. And those lakes are way down. I mean, they're finding dead bodies, they're finding cars, they're finding, all sorts of things that haven't been seen since those dams were put in place 60, 80 years ago. And those reservoirs were first, flooded. Salt Lake in Utah. I've been on Salt Lake. I mean, that's a giant lake, right? It's huge, but it's only an average of 8 feet deep. And it's been going down. It's lost 4 feet now in the last 10 years. And it continues to go down. Now, who cares? I mean, Salt Lake is so salty, man. It's 5 times saltier than the ocean. Nothing can live in there except these tiny little shrimp things. And some of the birds eat them, but birds die from that salt water all the time. So it's all around the lake. It's just full of dead bird carcasses where the birds have tried to drink that water and they've just died. And it's really stinky. But if that lake dries up, you've got this humongous now lake bed that's just full of toxic chemicals. And these are not man-made chemicals necessarily. They're just different metals that have just settled in that lake from washing out of the Rocky Mountains right next door. And then that all just blows out into Salt Lake City. And that happened in California, and it cost them $5 billion to cover up the dried up lake bed to stop spreading all this toxic dust into the city. And you have all these ski resorts in Utah that are going to be without snow because they depend on the water in Salt Lake, coming off in the wintertime, blowing up onto the mountains, coming up the side of the mountains, then turning into snow and dumping on the mountains. So we're having more of these sort of severe droughts here. Big rain there. I mean, Jackson, Mississippi got a big flood. Texas got a big flood. Death Valley got as much rain all year in one day, and people and cars and houses were wiped out because 1 inch of rain just gathers in trenches and then shoots down these trenches and creates these giant sort of rushes of water that wash everything out in their path. So we're seeing more and more of these severe types of weather events and longer prolonged heat periods. So like in the United States, they've just had their third hottest summer on record. The second hottest was last year.
Wow.
And the hottest record was in 1936 during the Dust Bowl. So what causes these things? Who knows? But you've got just two in a row, and then you've had a number. If you look at the last 6 years, that accounts for the last 5 hottest years in Canada have occurred in the last 6 years since we started keeping records around temperatures, which is the last 140 years we've been keeping records on temperatures. So it's not a permanent record, but if you look at the overall heat in the United States this summer, it was up 2.5 degrees above average, 2.5 degrees. So, you think, well, that's not bad. But when it starts to create these crazy heavy duty weather events, right? It's just, these floods and these droughts and floods and droughts and, California with all the droughts. And I think at one point, a third of the American population was in a heat warning area under a heat alert, in the Western United States. So we've had some pretty annoyingly hot weather down there, and different things across Canada, like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, the salmon fishing and parts of southern Newfoundland. The Atlantic salmon fishing was stopped for recreational angling because the rivers were too hot, and when you catch a fish and the waters are that hot, the fish can actually die when you let them go again. So they stop the fishing. So you see on the West Coast too, some of the rivers are less impacted, but we've got is it El Nino or the other one? Which is the cold one?
La Nina.
Yeah. So La Nina is happening this year, and it's going to happen next year, they're saying. And that's where the winds blow the warm surface area on the Pacific Ocean west, so away from the west coast of the Canada and the United States. So when you push the hot air, this hot, warmer surface water away from North America, you get an upwelling that comes in and to replace it. So the colder water comes up from below to replace the hot water that's moving away, kind of like a big sort of flip-flop. And then you end up with cold water, and that doesn't make more rain, right? That makes less rain, but cooler water, because the warmer water, when it's pushing up against the shore, that warmer water lifts up and it hits the mountains, climbs the mountains, turns into rain and falls back down. But when it's going the other direction, we get less rain. So we're going to have less rain again in the mountains this year. And so there, I'm not saying I'm not a weather expert at all, but I do follow it a little bit for this TV thing I do every 2 weeks on the environment. And there's certainly bigger swings. Bigger swings are happening 100%. In the weather. And that's got to be concerning.
And I would say our prognosticators when it comes to weather are at a loss to describe what is going on in regards to a typical year like we're supposed to be having, where the Caribbean and the Atlantic is quiet when it comes to tropical storms. Normally during this type of year and this setup, it should be very active, and it's not, which is surprising a lot of folks who have been watching and have been researching these weather events and these trends. And right now, they can't explain why the Caribbean and the Atlantic is so quiet when it comes to tropical storms. It's great for folks in the Carolinas and Florida and Texas and New Orleans, Louisiana, that place, because they're not having to deal with it. But to me, it's the quiet before the storm. And Jeremy's just mentioned too, there's a prediction that California will be hit with a 100-year flood. Who would have seen that coming with tropical storm? What is it, Eduardo? Which one is on the west coast that is running up the Baja Peninsula and is currently dumping a whole bunch of rain in areas that have not seen any rain this summer?
And then you go to Europe, and they've had such little rain and so much heat that their rivers are actually dried up. Right? They have to, fish are dying, rivers are drying. Boats can't move up and down the rivers anymore. The whole, tourism thing of these river boats, that's all stopped. And they said that could become a permanent thing in the summertime, is that these rivers just don't have water in them anymore. Yeah. So, again, but you're right. Like, why don't we have more hurricanes? We're having less. And yet you have these severe dumps of water here in India and Pakistan and, these giant flood events where the rain just pounds it. So there's more, the oceans are warming. There's more evaporation off the ocean. And where that water is being dumped out in terms of the clouds that it creates is becoming more intense, right? The typical places where those types of rainstorms happen, it's becoming more intense. And where you normally just have normal rain, it's not happening. And so I don't know. If things are changing a lot, I think that's the only thing we can really count on is changing. And as anglers, I think we should be more aware of, like, how are things changing? And I think that would be interesting just to track that as we, whether in our fishing logs, when we keep track of the fish we catch and when we catch them, where we catch them, the size and the species and so on. Keep an eye on the weather and the water temperature and the water clarity and the water depth. And I think that's going to be really important. And we're working with water rangers to put together a kit to help you track that. And I'm just saying, what I want to see in those kits too is ability to sample. If you encounter a spill of some sort of toxic spill, that you can take a sample and have a place to send that in. Or if you encounter a fish kill, that you can take some tissue samples and maybe collect that and have for a lab to look at. So I think those are the two really important things for anglers when it comes to any sort of sampling kit. They want to report fish kills, and they want to report spills, right? And then the rest is all pretty cool science too. But I think the more we start to track this, the more we'll understand, if there's patterns that are emerging and what those patterns are looking like, or if there's ever going to be any pattern, or if it's just going to get crazier, wilder.
Well, speaking of one pattern that has been witnessed by one of our CFNers, Steve Shaw, he's seeing more musky gulping air this year. Does the water temperature contribute to that behavior, or is it just because they're eating a lot?
Yeah, well, we talked about that, and according to Sean Landsman, he's quite a good researcher here at Carleton University and a doctorate. And he says they swallow, a 1 or 2 pound bass or walleye. Now they're carrying around an extra pound or two of weight in their belly. So now they lost their equilibrium, their neutral balance or buoyancy, and they start to sink. So they need to quickly take some air into their system. And they go up and they gulp a big chunk of air, and they can push that into their bladder. And that'll give them their neutral balance again, their neutral buoyancy, so they don't just plunk down on the bottom of the lake or the river. So is it that, or is it for oxygen, like a tarpon, right? You always hear about tarpon. If you let them get that one gulp of air, you've got another 20, 30 minutes of fight left in them. Every time they do it, you got another 20, 30 minutes of fight.
That's so true. So true. Jason Barnucz jumped in regards to how large rainfalls affect river fish. Can often respond positively after a large rainfall, especially thunderstorms, notably migratory species, not necessarily the case for resident species. So obviously, yeah, and this precludes to everything that I had read back in the day and still read, that in regards to how river fish are affected. And Bill is asking, muskie gulp. Got any pics or videos? I haven't myself. There are quite a few on Facebook. Wouldn't take you long to find it, Bill, but it is an awesome sight. And when you see it from afar, you really don't know what's going on. You think perhaps it's a fish that's dying because it seems motionless, but really what it's doing is, as Lawrence just mentioned, it's trying to save itself from drowning, basically.
From becoming a log.
Though this is increased development does have a negative impact on river ecology, species, and habitats. Human development does cause significant changes in river flows, low flows, peak flows, etc. Very true, 100%. I know you've talked about this at great length, Lawrence. And of course, there are more fires that are ablaze on our West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously in California, where they are predicting a heavy rainfall. And you've talked about several areas in BC that are just mudded right up. In fact, they had such mudslides that it choked the river.
Thousands of fish died. Thousands and thousands of fish died after that big rainstorm hit that area that had the big forest fires last year, and all the ash spewed into the river and killed thousands and thousands of fish. So that's another consequence where you see drought and then a big rainstorm and then all that siltation happening of ash, and so there can be big repercussions for sure.
Yeah, no, and we're going to see them going forward because these forest fires are becoming as normal as everyday life. Unfortunately, it seems like every time we turn on the TV, we're seeing another forest fire that's out of control, whether it be in BC, California, or anywhere along the West Coast. And it's a shame because what comes after that with all the rains and the lack of cover and ability to hold up those banks because the trees have lost all their foliage. It's terrible for the fish, and it's not good for us either that depend on good clean water.
It makes you think about the Great Lakes, right? 21% of the world's surface freshwater right here in the Great Lakes, largest freshwater watershed in the world, most valuable freshwater fishery in the world, right here in Canada, right? So, and look at all the other Great Lakes we've got, the wonderful lakes, Athabasca, Great Bear, Great Slave, and, Lake of the Woods, and on and on. We've got so many wonderful large lakes. We need, we're fortunate. And if you think about immigration patterns, and, I worked in the area of cross-border movement back in the 1990s. And I remember meeting this one individual, from an institute, and he talked about economic migration, and that was going to be a real thing, challenging, world orders and democracies and just society in general. And we see that now, right? We see that with the pressures on the American border, the Southern American border. We see that in Europe, with people migrating into the United States and Greece and Italy. We see that. We see real evidence of that. And that's not gonna slow down. And then you add on top of that, heat and drought and the lack of crops that many African nations are facing. We're going to have more events like that. So, and even in the United States, you see people migrating out of California. They just don't want to be part of California anymore. And all those forest fires that are near misses or direct hits and the heat. People are leaving California. That's unusual. Most people used to move to California. Now that's reversing, and they're coming up to places like Duluth and Minnesota, and places up there towards the Great Lakes. That people are going to come more towards Great Lakes. This isn't tomorrow, but it's happened. A lot has already happened in the last 25 years, and a lot more will happen the next 25 years. And that goes by in a heartbeat. 25 years can go by pretty damn quick. So, tracking and understanding for the sake of our fish and what we can do to make it better for our fish and what we can do as individuals. I think it's up to all of us now to watch out for that stuff and start to make notes. Because in 10, 20 years, people will be able to look back and share that information. And that's going to be invaluable information, because it's not the kind of research that scientists are doing now necessarily. They could be, or they should be, but it's going to be the citizen scientists that are going to really contribute to that database and make that information so we can understand better what we need to do to mitigate these issues.
Interesting that you talk about folks maybe migrating from California up to areas that have an abundance of fresh water. It's almost, like dinosaur age, medieval age, where folks are basically congregating around areas that have minerals and vast resources. That we're looking at that this day and age. That do we want to be in a California that unfortunately has a threat to their fresh water supply? Each and every year we have these droughts, no fault of their own. It's just there's just so many people demanding so much fresh water that there unfortunately isn't enough to go around. That some of these folks are going to move up to areas like Montana, the Dakotas, that aren't heavily populated like the Californians, the Texas, the New Yorks of the world, and have an abundance of fresh water. That's really interesting that we're getting back to sort of the grassroots of how we all came to be. And our urban centers started from something, and usually it was because we rested on the shores of whatever body of water that we could get as much fresh water from. So very cool.
Well, yeah, Atlantic Canada was the heart of Canada, industrial heart of Canada. It's not that anymore, but things can change. Absolutely, things do change, and people are definitely becoming weather migrants, and not just economic migrants. There's weather induced migration happening as well. We're just really lucky. I think we're so lucky that we don't even realize how lucky we have it. I think we need a bit of a wake up call to really understand, how good we have it in terms of our resources, the fish, the water, and let's safeguard it. Let's make sure it's around and do what we can.
Well, that's it. To Jeremy's point, it's even here in Ontario, and yes, there has been a mad exodus out of the urban core. Folks learned in COVID that we don't have to go to an office anymore; we can work from home. So they've decided, obviously, prices have gone up for areas in Muskoka and even further north, Sudbury's and what have you. That folks are starting to move up there, and Mother Nature's taking a hit because they have to accommodate all these people that are moving in, and there's lots of people. And again, it's what we know and what we've been living with, but now we're starting to see it move, and other areas in Ontario are affected. But yes, it is what it is. It is something that a trend that we're going to have to get used to seeing, dealing with. But at the end of the day, we are very, very lucky here in Ontario and all other provinces that straddle and are on the shores of our Great Lakes. There is a plethora of fresh water at our footsteps, and we're lucky.
We are lucky. We really are. And now, we as anglers, we always try to connect the dots between the weather, the water, and the fish, right? And now I think it's more than ever, we need to really dial in that science a bit and learn from each other what that means, because it's not just about catching fish or the bite is good or bad, but it's also is there going to be fish next year? Is there going to be fish in 5 years? Right? Yeah.
Amen, brother. Well, listen, one question before we go. I did see you made a post about the interview with Mariko Izumi. What else is going on in Bluefish Canada news this week and upcoming?
Well, this is interesting. We were down on the St. Lawrence River, upper St. Lawrence River, out of on the Canadian side out of Brockville, and on the American side out of Clayton. These two small communities are almost opposite each other on the just east of the Thousand Islands. So on the American side, we visited the Antique Boat Museum. This is this is the largest antique boat museum in North America. And I'll tell you, it's one well-endowed museum, because you think about, the Thousand Islands have been the playground of the rich. Starting 150 years ago, back in the 1870s, 12 trains every day would arrive from New York City with families in the summer from New York City, and they would come up there and spend time on the islands, private islands, beautiful mansions. This was where the 1% came to play, because before planes, before you could fly around, They took trains out of New York and they went to the Thousand Islands. It was like their Muskokas. And they built these wonderful mahogany boats, 20, 40, 60 foot, runabouts. It was their pride and joy. It was the way they competed with each other. It was their look who has the biggest boat, the fastest boat kind of thing. And now these families, 4 generations later, 5 generations, they don't want those boats to go away. So they've all donated money to this antique boat museum. And it's just a block full of gorgeous, gorgeous wooden boats, and many of them still work. And it's just amazing. And if they're not in the museum, they're in one of many, many barns in the area where they keep them. They have boat houses. They have boats on water. You can take tours on these boats. It's just absolutely astonishing. There was a beautiful fishing boat there from 1930. It was absolutely gorgeous. I was on that and just poking around, and the money that's coming into that museum to take care of these boats, right? They're pets. And then right across the river, we have a Canadian who has bought this old mill from the 1870s. It was a wheat mill, one of the largest wheat mills, the largest wheat mill in Eastern Canada for many years, until they opened up the borders with the United States and the wheat just flowed across into the United States and they milled it down there. Instead of making flour here, they made flour in the States. So all these mills became distilleries. And most of that booze was produced during the Prohibition and then went to the United States as well, unofficially, of course, right across the river, right? How easy is that? So then you had all these bootleggers, history. Anyways, there's this entrepreneur. He's bought 13 acres. He's bought this old mill, the owner's mill house from the 1920s, his beautiful Great Gatsby mansion, horse stables, and a number of other old stone buildings, all built in the 1870s, 1850s. And he's turning it into a conference center, a research center, a laboratory, and it's all about giving back to the river, to understand the river, what's going on in the river, what's going on with the fish. And Bluefish Canada has an open invitation to hold courses there and do research there. And we'll be collaborating with this individual. But it's one person doing all this with his millions of dollars. Versus right across the river, you have many, many, many rich people taking care of their toys with their millions of dollars, right? So I'm thinking, wouldn't that be nice if that could balance out a little bit? Like, it's not just toys. There's the fish and the water and the river that your toys sit on top of. That also needs a little care and love and attention. So it's interesting that, but it's coming. The rebalancing is starting, and there's more and more people interested in not just playing on top of the water, but what's going on under the water as well.
Well, you're so right. When we see what's going on in Lake Mead and the folks in California and Nevada who depend on that water, sometimes I guess we take it for granted every time we stare out on Lake Ontario and think of this vast body of water. How could we ever be without fresh water? But that doesn't necessarily give us a free get out of jail card. At the end of the day, we are all accountable. And as Steve mentioned, regardless, we need to do our part when it comes to fresh water, clean fresh water. It's not necessarily about going out and having a great day on the water, fishing and making sure that we catch our limits and catch that trophy fish. Be mindful of how you're conducting yourself when it comes to garbage. If you're a smoker, throwing the butts out of the boat. Some folks put them in cans, bottles, what have you. Just be mindful of where your garbage is going and how you're conducting yourself. Because as we said once, and we'll say it again, just because it's been going on for a number of years doesn't necessarily make it right. So do your part to change your behavior, change others' behavior, and hopefully we will have fresh, clean water for many years to come.
Well said, my friend. Well said.
As always, my friend, thanks so much for joining us each and every Monday. It goes quick.
Yes.
Our time together. We look forward to seeing you next Monday, and of course, wish you all the best during this week. And hopefully, you can get out fishing and enjoy some time out on the water.
Thanks, buddy, and thanks for having me, you guys.
Right on, dude. You take care of yourself.
You too.
Wealth of information. We are so lucky to have these lads join us each Monday to discuss some of the things that maybe get overlooked, maybe some of the things that we take for granted, but we get grounded each Monday with these three lads. And speaking of grounded, Jay Barnucz has finally landed. He's going to be joining us right after this word from his sponsor.
Want to know the difference between power bait and other soft plastics? Ask the fish. Berkeley scientists have thousands of flavors tested on thousands of fish. Natural, man-made, every bait that's ever hit the water. No matter the shape, size, or color, Power Bait is the only one that is scientifically proven. Fish bite and will not let go.
Jay Barnucz in the house.
Hey, Scottie, how's it going?
Fantastic, my friend. Always a pleasure to see you. Nice to see that you've landed. Looks like a hotel room.
Yeah, well, living the dream, buddy. Living the dream.
Just don't wake up, buddy. Just don't wake up.
Yeah, that's right.
What are you up to? What brings you to where you are now?
Wrapping up a project up near Lake Huron. Actually following up on historical records, kind of like what I usually do. And then next week we're going to head down to the Thames River for a few weeks of trawling on the Thames. It looks like we'll be out probably until late October, early November this year sampling. So yeah, don't have the base layers and the toque yet, but it's probably going to come out soon. Looking at the weather forecast going the next few weeks.
So as you've heard, and thanks so much for chiming in with some of that some great information that you shared. But for your time that you've been an angler, been involved in the fisheries and fisheries management, things that you've learned. I mean, something I have always read and historically have always gotten at least a consensus of is when it comes to weather events, migratory fish in a river system aren't necessarily as affected to thunderstorms and what have you as the resident fish are.
Yeah.
Much like in a lake, they seem to be more affected than our river counterparts.
You may remember back in the day, M&R used to run a weir on Wilmot Creek.
Yes.
Right around kind of at the bottom end of the 115 off of is it called Cobbledick Road? I think in that area near the bottom of Wilmot. So it's above the train trestle, but below Orono. Anyways, so I used to have buddies from when I was in college who worked the weir, and they would tell me that when there was thunderstorms, so migratory fish will run with the rain. We all get that, right? So I'm sure tonight, and not even a lot of rain, it seems like just a few millimeters of rain will get those fish in the move, right? But when thunderstorms would happen on the lower Wilmot at the weir, the fish would come in droves, especially when those storms happened overnight. And I've seen this happen time and time again where you get an all-night rain and thunderstorms. It just seems to push those fish. And so you're right. The resident fish and our river fish don't respond as badly to temperature changes as lake fish. And you'll even hear, the best example would be a lot of bass anglers talk about this, where they're going to, in bass tournaments where they go and they might not fish the lake area, they're going to fish a nearby river because those fish aren't as impacted. But those migratory fish love the high flow events, whereas resident fish, they respond negatively because you've changed. One thing people often forget is fish like things to be stable, right? And that can be water level, that can be water clarity. Recently with all the warm weather we've had, some of the places I've been fishing, dude, it's been like in the high 70s for water temperature, right? In shallow water. And the algae bloom is crazy. And the water's still clear. Like I can still see down 3-4 feet in some places, but usually I can see down 6, 7, 8 feet in these places. So even though it's still clear, the fish don't like it in those areas, I believe, because they're used to better water clarity. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yep.
So these high flows and weather changes, the fish have been in a real funk recently to me. Been catching fish, been having fun, but it's been a lot of work to catch the fish. Mm-hmm. And the pre-show chat with Jim and Lawrence, it's always good. And, maybe one day we'll do it behind the scenes. But to hear Jim tell his story about all the fish he caught on Sunday in that weather change, and then my version of that story is, so here I am, 600 kilometers to the west of Jim. And I'm fishing with Trevor and Owen in the kayaks on Saturday. And it's hot. like nice, like a nice, dude, it's a nice day, but not for September. It's like an August day. It shouldn't be this hot, this nice. And we caught some fish, but the fish were in a bit of a funk. And there was a bass tournament the next day. And we were fishing some areas of Long Point Bay that when I told people where we were, they're like, you went there in a kayak? I'm like, yeah, it was only like an hour to get there. So I'm not going to tell where we were, but we covered some grounds. The old hamstrings are a little tight today, Scotty, the 47-year-old hamstrings. But we caught fish, but it was not easy. And we ran into a couple of bass boats, one angler that I personally knew, and I knew they were fishing the event the next day. And they said, yeah, and I didn't really ask them what they caught. I knew they were pre-fishing. I just wanted to say hi. But at the tournament, they one boat brought in a second place bag of like 18 pounds.
Wow.
And I said to him, backstage, I was there volunteering Trevor and Owen and I were volunteering that day. I said, so did you catch him in that bay where I saw you? He goes, yeah. And he goes, I didn't catch him like that on Saturday. Shook a couple fish off. But I rolled in there with that rain and that cold. And he goes, I got 16 pounds in short order on a spinnerbait. And I'm like, yeah. And so that weather change got those fish on the feed bag. I couldn't buy a fish on a frog on Saturday. But another buddy who doesn't know the first guy I just talked about, fished the same area, fished a frog in less than 3 feet of water and caught his limit on a frog. So we got spinnerbaits in play, frogs in play, two different guys, two different patterns, generally the same area. They all caught good limits on Saturday or Sunday. And that was the weather change. That this hot funk we've been in, the fish have been in a funk. That's the only word I can use. They're still catchable. I'm not going to complain. I think I got 7 fish on Saturday, or nothing big. I got a 17-inch and a couple of 16s, like that kind of size. But a lot of small ones. Like, the guys laugh where I unhooked this little 12-incher and I like just kind of flip it over my shoulder, like, get out of here, But they're still fun to catch, Yep. And turns out the next day it was lights out. Now, I wouldn't have gone out there in a kayak in that way the weather was, but that it makes me feel good that even though I didn't catch fish as well as I wanted to on Saturday, I was in the right area. I just needed the weather to change for me. And I think that weather change on Sunday was the kickstart of our fall slide. And I mean that in a good way. Like up here this week, it's looking like 14 morning lows, anywhere from like 8. I think we're going to hit 8 degrees one morning this week. Looks like tomorrow's going to be 14. That's great. That's exciting. But get out and enjoy it because it's over fast. By the end of September, we get into October, then the weather can really turn and the winds can it'll slowly start to get windier now too. And we all know that we all don't fish as well in the wind. Like I'm not a fair weather angler, but wind in the fall picks up. Yep. It helps it can help the fishing, but it doesn't help the anglers all the time. So everyone's got to get out fishing like right now.
100%. And when it comes to wind, this has definitely been the year of the wind, right from wintertime till now. It has been a year of a lot of wind, like I've never seen before, to be quite honest with you. And I'm hoping that doesn't continue to trend that way. Great publication here that Steve's sharing the link to in regards to climate change on fish and aquatic ecosystem in the Great Lakes. Definitely a good read for that, as well as the numerous other things that are in that publication. So I invite you to go over to that after the live and have a look at some of the great publications that have been put on by the government. Thanks, Steve, for that. Something I wanted to ask you, Mike Howard has said that he's seen fish move in Gene Clear water, and 100%. And we are starting to see salmon caught in very shallow water. They're starting to fish the piers. They're starting to fish the inlets to some of our big tributaries that are on the North Shore. In regards to the salmon and all those folks that are doing, hatchery work and what have you, I have a feeling this is going to be a great year in the sense that they're not going to have to be out in that cold weather in the fall. That if they're already starting to run, it's great for our hatchery managers are collecting eggs.
One thing about that too with the clear water, Mike, is we often as anglers we focus on weather, which is important. But this time of year, one of the big factors is length of day. As length of day changes, fish will start to feed up. So I think sometimes fish in September get into a bit of a funk because the days are starting to get shorter. Like, it's a bit frustrating right now where I got real used to going out after work for like 4.5 hours of fishing. Now it's like 3 hours, like 3.25, where, I'm on the walkie-talkie going, Trevor, dude, it's 8 o'clock. It's going to be dark in 10 minutes. Get your butt back to the ramp. Like, it sucks, to be honest, but that triggers the fish. And I think that's why you see salmonids like Chinook's, cohos starting to stage even in the clear water, because it's length of day. Photo period can impact fish movement this time of year as much as weather. And they probably both work very closely together, right?
I was going to ask you too, one question that I get asked, not on the regular, but I've been asked in the past, and I'll get you to weigh in on it. In the summertime, when things are normal, things are stable, as you mentioned, fish like things that are stable because they don't want to be stressed. And sunlight does stress fish out. One, if they are the object of being prey, or perhaps they are stalking prey, that night cover really helps out. But unfortunately, when it comes a little bit earlier than it did, say, yesterday and last week, some folks, and I believe this, that the morning bite in the fall is more productive than, say, the night bite. Whereas in the summertime, when you have those steady long days, that night bite, especially when that sun hits the tree line, holy smokes, if you're a walleye angler, that's where you want to be, and you want to be on the water, because that's when the bite is hottest. Do you find the same, Jay, that in the fall months, because you get those shorter days, that night bite isn't as productive as it was in the summer, and that you find that a morning bite is more productive later on in the year?
So I think it's species dependent, and this is just anecdotal. Okay, so your point about walleye, I agree with it. I think the morning bite intensifies as the year goes on, and you talk to some of the best walleye anglers we know are some of the best guides, and you heard Jim talking about like Greg and others. They're starting their day in the dark. They want to be out there when that sun's coming up, right? But bass might behave differently. Bass like it a bit warmer. So in the fall, like if you start getting into late September, October, when you might want to cherry pick those warm afternoons to catch more bass. Those cold mornings might not be as productive as a warm afternoon after a stretch of cooler weather. So I think now don't I tell this to Trevor and Owen, because I spent some time with them recently. I'm like, just because we talk about this doesn't mean just wait till the nice day to go fishing. Go when you can, because there's always something to learn. But I think in the fall, I think for bass, they still love that warm weather. Those like 20-degree days. You get those, like, I remember last year, Thanksgiving weekend, we went out to Long Point Bay.
Yeah. And
we smashed the largemouth on a warm afternoon. It got up to like 22 degrees. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always happen, because if it was more seasonal that day, they wouldn't do that. But walleye are different. Walleye are a cool water species. Bass are more a warm water species, right? So.
No, 100%. Great point. It being species specific. That's what I found with the walleye anyway. It's not to say that they aren't there on those evenings, but in the summertime, I tell you, that sun hits the tree line, and it's the feedbacks go on. Somebody rings a doorbell. And I just find in the mornings, that same bite you'll find with your walleye in a morning bite situation, just because all of a sudden now you've had all that darkness, the sun is coming up. It's the only thing that the fish can get in tune to is it's getting light out. So very interesting how it affects fish. And of course, none of us have fins or spending enough time in the water to know ourselves, but it's just interesting to be able to share this kind of information amongst anglers. You might see it differently, like Mike mentioned about his backyard, as well as Jeremy, Corey out in the West Coast. Everything's different, but it's interesting.
Another thing too, Scottie, is, and what a lot of people forget too, is that this time of year there's a lot of changes going on with the habitat and the prey. Like the forage is changing. Bass will start feeding more on prey fish as opposed to just feeding. Like they'll feed on a bit of a mix all summer, crayfish, bait fish. They're going to start being more bait fish oriented as once we get into later September. Walleye are going to probably just if they drop out deeper, they're going to start maybe feeding more on open water prey as opposed to like yellow perch. They might switch over to smelt or to ciscos, depending on the water body. So as anglers, we have to adapt to that. The other thing too, for bass anglers, largemouth anglers, is the vegetation changes throughout the entire summer too. So, there's a lot of algae. So some bays right now have a lot of algae growth on them versus bays that don't have a lot of algae. I don't like fishing areas with lots of algae. I find that's a lot of dead and decomposing vegetation. The fish don't like that as much. When you get algae, you get decreases in oxygen versus increases in oxygen. So I like to find clean weed. But sometimes too, like there's this weed out there, and I don't know if any anglers know about this, but there's a vegetation out there called water celery. A lot of people call it eelgrass, and it has a little spiral on it with a little bean pod at the top. Nothing makes me madder than water celery, Scottie, when I'm fishing for largemouth. That little spiral thing with the little bean pod fouls just about every bait that I got. So, and where these areas in Long Point Bay where we're fishing, there's water celery everywhere, or I think it's called wild celery, water celery. And it's annoying. I was actually like, the boys were laughing at me on Saturday because I'm like, this stupid water celery is ticking me off. Like the only thing that worked for me on Saturday, because I had to fish around some of this water celery, was a swim jig, right? So basically a flipping jig that has a thinner skirt, scaled back with a swim bait trailer. And I'm basically just pitching this out and I'm slow rolling the swim jig through the weeds. And that was the bait that worked. I usually prefer a chatterbait in those areas, but with the vegetation the way it was, I couldn't get bit on a chatterbait because it kept fouling. But a swim jig. So, Jim talked about don't do the same thing for too long. So I go out in these areas with kind of a two-prong approach, swim jig and a chatterbait. And I always bring a flipping jig and things like that. But I find in a kayak, especially when I want to cover water, you want to fish horizontal baits. And I was fishing, and Jim's point about vibrating baits are great in the fall. But where I was, it was, we're talking the deepest it was 3.5 feet. The deepest I was fishing. A lot of my fish came out of 2.5 feet of water. So, so the baits I chose were able to fish those areas. But yeah, it was a really neat day. But then to see that weather change was really cool. So everyone's just got to get out fishing there right away.
100%. It's funny you mentioned about the algae, because I remember being introduced to fishing a frog for the first time. And I remember looking at the individual that was up front and it casted into this big bloom of algae.
Yeah.
And it was like culture shock to me. What you're fit? Don't you want to fish the open? Why would you throw it in there? And lo and behold, doesn't he pull a largemouth out? So it was interesting to see how certain times of the year and how certain cover can increase and be productive when it comes to the species that you're targeting. My first experience at bass was, that was like doing a 180 from walleye. Speaking of walleye, Bill has said that the fall walleye, this is much like the Bay Quinte. Mm-hmm. Your numbers might slow down, but of course your size goes up in the fall. And yes, we were talking about that before we went on live. I was asking Jim in terms of Georgian Bay, when the walleye start to migrate into those shallows, and usually it's late November, December, much like it is for the Bay Quinte. And then of course, Ed, I was waiting for you to chime in. How many sunburn walleye days where the sun was blistering down, but they were chewing hard?
Absolutely.
100%.
And that's the thing. Like, we talk about, we got to go in the morning, got to go in the afternoon. You go when you can go, and you make the most of the time you have. And some days you can get them chewing. Like some of the best days I've had back trolling for walleye in northern Quebec and northern Ontario has been like right after lunch. Like literally, I got a belly full of walleye and I'm going back out to the rock pile, and I've had one of the best afternoons I ever had of walleye fishing was I got a sunburn while I was flipping, walleye in off a bottom bouncer. Like, that was one of my favorite days, and it was hot as blazes and calm, and it was flat calm and hot, right? So you never know.
No, 100%. And I've been there with you, Ed, on those sunburn days where it was hotter than a Hobbs of Haiti, and yet it was one of the most productive days of walleye fishing I've ever seen.
So Steve's got a comment there about algae. So Steve, algae's funny thing. So don't think that algae is just like stuff floating on the surface. Like we do see that blue-green algae, like the clumps. You'll see algae also growing on the vegetation where it kind of like, you'll see coontail and milfoil kind of covered in this droopy green stuff, right? But sometimes too, on really hot days, you'll actually see like in the water, like little bits of green. It's almost like a snow globe. Like Steve, you fish Rice Lake. I've seen it there. It's like someone took Rice Lake and shook it up, and you'll see these little bits of green. That's just the wall or the pollen, the algae like blooming in the water column. And that happens, right? Especially on lakes that are productive, like Rice, where you have a lot of eutrophication going on. It happens. But the good news, and I want to tell this quick story. I've told people this over the years. Years ago, the Hamilton Bassmasters had a tournament with another club out of Niagara. And I think there was probably 15 or 20 boats in that event. And Scottie was in Hamilton Harbor, which in the summertime is a tough place to catch a bass. But the story goes, we canceled the tournament in mid-September. We didn't cancel, we postponed because they had an algae bloom. And the local authorities had said, do not touch the water. Don't let dogs drink it. Like it was bad.
Yep. We
put it off 2 weeks. We waited till the end of September. And then it cooled right down. We got into single-digit lows at night. The water, I'm not going to say it cleared up. It was clearing up a lot. And we caught so many fish in that tournament. I think almost every boat got a limit. The two biggest fish tied over 5 pounds for largemouth. The winning bag was 20 pounds of largemouth. Oof. And I'm going to tell you, 2 weeks before that event, no one could catch a bass in that bay because it was the fish were funky because of the algae. They weren't in a good mood. So this happens. But once we get those single digits at night, the water just starts to clear up. That algae bloom just kind of disappears. And for about it depends on how the fall goes, but I'm going to say 2 to 4 week period, you're going to have some great fishing if you get out, especially for bass. The walleye fishing I'm not going to say it slows down, but it does change a bit. The only way I've actually ever caught walleye, like in the Kawarthas in the fall, has been actually drifting with a hair jig and ripping it. Like that's like, I don't know any other way to catch them. Scottie, is that wrong? That's the only way I know. That's all I've been ever, that time of year. That's all I've ever been taught in the Kawarthas is to drift those weed flats and just rip a big hair jig through them, right? But
it was finished
during the year.
We had Tim Allardon talking about drop shot for walleye, right? Something that I've been doing all my life. It was probably brought up by the Linders as more of a 3-way rig setup. Yeah, but just dragging like a small little, 2.5, 3 inch swim bait with a weighted bottom, or sometimes we call it the Horwood Special, where we have a 3/8 jig head on the bottom and we drag that. Yep. Either way, that drop shot presentation has always done really, really well in the fall, targeting walleye, just because, of course, as you know, the algae blooms and you've got all kinds of vegetation that you're now struggling to get in and out of. But 100%. It's interesting how a hair jig can be just as productive in the fall as it is in the spring.
Yeah. Corey makes a good point. Like this blue-green algae, it is harmful to people. So we're in kayaks and we're fishing some small bodies of water where there's apparent blue-green algae. I'm very tough on Trevor when we get home. I'm like, leave your shoes in the garage or leave them outside. We're going to wash them off. As soon as you get home, wash your hands, wash your arms, because we're paddling. Like we're not, if there's globs of it, we're not swimming or anything like that. But like you're definitely, when you're kayaking and stuff, your hands are getting wet and stuff. Like it definitely don't eat anything. Wash your hands really well. It's really nasty stuff. It can be really. It's something that I've been paranoid about. I've never had an issue with it, but I'm definitely aware of it for sure. Good point, Corey.
No, absolutely. And of course, when that toxic algae dies off, it's even more poisonous than regular algae, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, robs far more oxygen out of a water system than regular algae does. But I have been wrong before. Jay, what's upcoming this week for you? What have you got planned?
Well, I got to show you a picture, buddy. I hope this is going to work out here. So that's from yesterday. I was the weighmaster for the London Children's Hospital Charity Bass Tournament. That's Brad, the MC, and that's the second place team with the largemouth in the bay that I saw them pre-fishing. That was dad and daughter. She didn't want to hold any fish up, so I helped out. And I think it was 18 pounds they weighed in. It was fantastic. Brad Thompson, I got to give a shout out to Brad while I have a moment here. Brad is the general manager for the McDonald Turkey Point Marina in Turkey Point. This tournament's been running this was the 22nd year of this tournament. We even managed to run this tournament during COVID. Like,
yes, I do remember that.
It fell between the waves. Yeah. Like literally, we rode the waves and we made it work. So we never had to cancel it. $200 to enter, includes big fish for $20. $80 from each entry goes to London Children's Hospital. Plus Brad and Julie and his daughters, they do fundraising all year. They hold concerts down there, and they're just shy. Next year they're gonna surpass $200,000 they've raised for London Children's Hospital. So, so every year I used to fish it as a competitor. Now I don't. I'm the fish weigher guy. And when you're the fish weigher guy, you can't fish tournaments because when you're weighing the fish, that's a conflict of interest. But what's great is that Trevor and Owen came yesterday. After spending a day in the kayaks, they came out and volunteered their time to run the fish and help me and help Brad for a great cause. So shout out to the Thompson family and the McDonald Turkey Point Marina and all the great anglers that came out in the rain yesterday. And I'll tell you, it did get ugly in the afternoon. The wind got a little ugly. And 33 teams came out, and they raised over $1,000 yesterday, so that they're almost at $200,000. And this is honestly one of the longest bass tournaments running in Ontario at 22 years. There's very few tournaments that have run that long. So I'm actually gonna throw in the chat while I can just a link to
outstanding. That is absolutely another great story from this past weekend. We had Wilma and now this. That is absolutely fantastic. So that is the area that the charity tournament is held at McDonald Marine.
Yeah, and it's great. What Brad does is so with Long Point Bay, like Long Point Bay is massive, like the whole bay from the tip of Long Point to Nanticoke. And then what Brad does is Turkey Point Marina is so there's the inner bay and then the outer bay, right? The inner bay, Turkey Point is just outside of the inner bay. So what everyone does is it's inner bay only. So everyone launches at Turkey Point and they just drive into the inner bay. And this time of year, it's pretty much a largemouth contest because the smallmouth and the inner bay have all left because it's so warm. They're gone to the outer bay. And usually this time of year, it almost always happens. The weather's pretty questionable for the event. And it's always at that fall transition time. So usually there's a lot of there's not everyone catches fish. There's a lot of teams that get skunked. But, you know, it's a charity event. And they average 30 to 40 teams a year for this tournament. It's fantastic. So, yeah, shout out to those. Shout out to the Thompson and the McDonald Marina. And I can't even tell you, you know, Scottie, you go to some of the events, there's so many sponsors, you can't even list them all. And I want to even give a shout out to our new member of provincial parliament. She came out and she, Bobby Ann Brady. She's the only independent in Ontario in the legislature right now. And she came out between events because she loves fishing and her family loves fishing. So she made it and she got up on stage and addressed the crowd. And that's the first time Brad's had I'm going to say a dignitary come out to a bass tournament. And that kind of made our day. We're like, darn right. It's like, I appreciate that Bobby Ann and other dignitaries go to this event, that event, farmers markets and Hall of Fames and stuff. But to see her come out to a bass tournament and to get up on stage and talk about her love of fishing and she knows my son and she knows me through like baseball and minor hockey. And she's like, to see us out there supporting fishing and the local fishery, do that in the rain with my smelly raincoat on. All good, man.
That's hilarious. Right on. Well, Jay, as always, our time runs so quick.
All good.
I know you probably are looking to get some rest and maybe stretch out those hamstrings
Yeah.
from yesterday.
Gonna watch my Blue Jays beat those Tampa Bay Rays. Go Jays!
It's very close, isn't it? Isn't it? The race it's on.
Yeah, they got 5 games this week against Tampa, and if they have to keep it close with Tampa, so Tampa's playing well. I'm kind of, that's why I keep looking over here. I'm like, oh, there's Bobo. There's my boy Bo Bichette. But yeah, it's a close race. But you know what? That's what makes baseball exciting this time of year. If it was a blowout, we'd already plan on the parade. So let's keep it exciting, right?
100%. And for all those who are enjoying the fall because of its sports, not just because of fishing, you have been treated really well with NFL, with college, CFL.
Yeah.
And of course, hockey is going to start. It's just around the corner. This is a great time. This is my favorite season. It always has been, always will be. Love the fall for a variety of reasons. But Jay, as always, really enjoy and thank you for your time. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
All the best. So that's a wrap for the show. Thanks, Steve, who's been working hard behind the scenes with all the links. All those who have joined us tonight, really appreciate that. And support local. True North Baits. Jamie puts out a great assortment of plastics, as do our many other partners like North Shore. We really appreciate your generosity. And we will be paying due to all those who have supported the CFN Fish Off and all of its participants with various posts throughout the upcoming days and weeks, thanking all of those who support us, because if you support us, you support the community, and we can't thank you enough for that. Again, just a reminder, if you are looking for a fish edit, a photo edit, put it in the inbox at the Canadian Fishing Network Facebook page. You will see message. It's a big blue bar. Click message, and it will allow you to post photos for Steve and Walt to do some magic, as I would say. Absolutely incredible edits that are coming out of those two recently. And for all those who share videos, just your journeys, we love those too. So keep it up. Stay healthy. Stay safe. Love you all. Have yourselves a great week. And hopefully you get out and wet a line. At least we've given you a reason to. Get the blood going anyway. Dave, it's time to take us out, buddy. Can't think of anybody better to do it than yourself. Again, thanks for coming. Thanks for your time. And we'll see you next Monday. All the best.
Well, as much as I hate to admit it, I guess we've run out of time. So I've enjoyed it, but I'm going to do something I haven't done since season 1. Turn out the lights. The party's over. They say that all good things must end.